Johar, Jai Bhim, good morning. I'm deeply honored to be giving this talk today at the 16th Balagopal Memorial event. I last met Balagopal in August 2009 when he came to speak at a convention on peace talks. We, in the rest of the country, also miss him enormously today. When there are feeble peace talks about peace talks, but no peace and no talks, whether in Bastar or barely after 2 years of genocide in Gaza. Statehood in Kashmir, a region that was close to Balagopal's heart, has still not been restored 6 years after it was taken away, along with Article 35A, which guaranteed people the right to their own land against outsiders. Whether Gaza or Kashmir or Bastar, Ladakh or Nicobar, the fight against occupation by outsiders and settler colonialism or occupation by others, the fight for the right to define one's own future in one's own way is at the heart of the world's common struggles. The meaning of peace, like everything else that we hold dear, the constitution, democracy, has been appropriated by people in power and is being subverted. So Amit Shah can claim that he has restored peace in Kashmir, that by March 2026 they will have restored peace in Bastar, even as the killings, the arrests, the takeover of land intensify. This infection has even spread to the Nobel Prize Committee, which has just given Machado, who is a right-wing supporter of European fascism, of the Likud, has invited others to come and bomb her own country. And she has just been given the Peace Prize. So we know now that the Peace Prize, as it is understood by governments, by people in power, is meaningless compared to the peace that is being worked out every day on an everyday basis by people who are resisting the takeover of their land, who are trying to bring peace to Gaza, bring justice to themselves. So what is the nature of the peace that Bastar and its people deserve? And what is the nature of the peace that is being offered to them by the government? There is a sense today that Bastar and indeed all of India is at a crossroads. There is fascism behind us, fascism ahead of us. But as Brecht said, because things are the way they are, things will not stay the way they are. I'm somewhat embarrassed to be here today because I cannot claim to speak for Bastar. I am not speaking for Adivasis, and it's been some months since I've even visited. I'm only a long-term observer, a documenter of death, a reporter on resilience. So I'm drawing today on three important sources. One is an interview given by Manish Kunjam, who's, I think, one of the most far-sighted Adivasi leaders, to CG Khabar 2 weeks ago. मैं चाहती हूँ कि जितने लोग उसको देख सके प्लीज़ आप सुन लीजिए, क्योंकि उसमें वो बहुत सारे चीज़ें के बारे में बात करता है, माइनिंग, पीस टॉक्स, एम्प्लॉयमेंट, वो बहुत ही बेहतर इंटरव्यू है. दूसरी जो लोकल बस्तर के जर्नलिस्ट है मालिनी सुब्रमण्यम, जिनके आर्टिकल स्क्रोल में बहुत पब्लिश हुए हैं, और भी लोकल जर्नलिस्ट है, और CPJC कैंपेन फॉर पीस एंड जस्टिस इन छत्तीसगढ़, उनका डॉक्यूमेंटेशन which has been distributed in the hall. If not, please pick up a copy or ask, because we have tried in that to do a detailed sort of analysis of the deaths in the last 2 years. So I'm indebted to all of these for giving us some vision from an area which the government claims is emerging from darkness to light, but which it keeps simultaneously cloaked in a heavy curtain of darkness, constraints on reporting, and the murder of the journalist Mukesh Chandrakar, who was reporting corruption in roadworks, and his body was chopped up and put into a septic tank, is one example of the constraints that information faces when we try to get information on Bastar. So in today's talk, I want to look at 5 issues. One is demographic change and land grabs. The second is violence. The third is securitization and infrastructure. The fourth is mining and extractive projects. And the fifth is institutional failure, particularly in the judiciary. But first, let me start by addressing the question that HRF, the title is given by HRF, so Whose Bastar? The Struggle for Adivasi Futures. So I want to start by asking the question, whose Bastar? And the answer can only be that the land does not belong to anybody but to itself. It is the people in the local Bastar cosmology, it is the people who belong to the earth. It is not the earth which is owned by people. And this is the fundamental difference in the way that the local people relate to the earth as life-giving bhoom, mati, jaga, and the way the government and the outsiders see the earth as an object to be mined and exhausted and discarded in heaps by giant excavators. In earlier times, if people fell sick, they took it as a sign that the earth was angry with them and moved on. Today, the mining companies come in and destroy the earth before they themselves move on. Across Bastar, there is a division between the mother goddesses, the matas, the devis, who keep away sickness, and they are propitiated at annual jatras. And then there is the earth, jaga, which is propitiated at the annual seed sowing festivals. And many villages across Bastar, in fact all villages, have a sacred grove to Talin Kodo, which is usually next to a CRD tree, which is a hotspot of biodiversity, these sacred groves. But what is most distinctive to this area, which I have not seen anywhere else, is the system of clan gods, Pen. And it is these gods, the Pen, who are represented physically by cross logs, who divide the territories between the clans. It is the earth which showed the Pens, the villages to settle. It is the Pens which divided up the land between different territories and regulated the relations between the clans. And even now, intra-clan marriage continues to be the biggest social skin. So each Pen has a palli or an area which is theirs, and their children and their wives, because everybody has all the gods have relations just like humans have relations. And there are cases where one Pen may have several villages under them, or one village may have several Pens. So it really shows you the relationship between the different clans. And in addition to the Pens, there are gods who live in the mountains. There is the Thakur Dev of Surjagad, the Rao of Raughat in Narayanpur, Niyam Raja of Niyamgiri, Nandaraj in Dantewada. In 1889, a British traveller recorded, and I quote, "Every prominent mountaintop is the residence of the spirit of the hill, who must be satisfied by an offering before Dahiya, that is shifting cultivation, Podu, Penda, can be cut on its slopes," unquote. If shifting cultivation which does not destroy the hill needs the god's permission, the permission of Nandaraj or Surjag or Raughat, how much more necessary should it have been for anyone who wants to mine that hill to get permission from the local people and the local gods? But not only does the government not recognize the gods, they don't recognize Schedule 5, but people themselves are no longer allowed by these mining companies to access their own sacred spaces. So for people who insist ki mandir wahi banayenge, when there is no proof that a mandir ever existed, the ease with which they destroy the sacred spaces of Adivasis in their quest for mining and for other forms of extraction is breathtaking. People need NMDC permission to access the Nandaraj shrine. Nandaraj's brother Baikesa, who according to local people used to tease girls, so villagers got angry with him, they cut off his head and they built a rock over there. And now NMDC has built a road over that memorial to Baikesa. And people say that for a long time, Baikesa managed to keep NDMC trucks from mining by something or the other would happen to the trucks, flat tires, something. So then the NMDC got the local priests to, they offered 12 trucks of eggs to Baikesa, and since then his powers have been bound. So whenever the Permas ask Baikesa how to prevent mining, he says, free me, I have been bound, I want to help you to avoid mining, but I have been bound. So we're talking not only of the way in which the entire landscape has been destroyed, the sacred landscape, but also the binding down of people and the spirits that animate their life. The land speaks to people in other ways too, through their knowledge of what trees and plants give what kinds of red fruits and medicines, through forests in which people have settled new villages, breaking down the hard roots with their sweat and their labor. But for the government, these new settlements in Kishtaram, in Golapalli, in parts of Bijapur, in the Mad, many of whom of these villages were settled or villages were supported in settling these villages by the Maoists. According to the government, these are now merely unsurveyed land, and because they are not surveyed, they are not recorded in people's names, they are treated as government land. And because the government treats it as government land, they feel that they can set up security camps in these lands. And also because people lost much of their documentation when their homes were burnt in Salvajudum, and before that, when the Maoists carried out their own land distribution, they told people they didn't need government records. So nobody has government records. Government has all the records, or it claims it has no records, and so everything belongs to the government. And this is not just a question of Chhattisgarh or Bastar, but even in Jharkhand, by conveniently ignoring Khatian Part 3, the government has just appropriated a huge amount of common land. So apart from the government appropriating land for camps, and I'll come to the camps later, but basically there are almost as many camps as there are villages. They stretch across a huge line. There's been a huge rush of outsiders illegally buying Adivasi land in the expectation of mining coming up. Bijapur MLA Vikram Mandavi has written to the governor asking for an immediate ban on the sale of Adivasi land in Bijapur, Sukhma, Narayanpur and Dantewada. And Manish Kunjam has noted in his interview that with just 3 mines operational in Beladila, 2 whole new townships have come up in Kirandul and Bacheli. And imagine if all these new mines that are being proposed come up, the face of the district will be changed forever. For a long time, when I used to listen to the radio while driving to college, I would hear, sometimes you would hear people, a student from Bastar has done very well, they have come to college or they've done something, and I would always find that the name was a non-Adivasi name. So now it's really who is from Bastar, the idea has been completely changed. With the loss of land, with demographic influx, political power also shifts. Jagdalpur has already been de-reserved, and all the contracts for buses, for road works, everything is handled by non-Adivasis, the trade is handled by non-Adivasis. And with all of these people settling in such large numbers, they have brought new gods. The RSS has penetrated into every village, and what may have been internal village rifts over people not celebrating the festivals together with respect to Christians has now been magnified into a huge amount of anti-Christian violence. So I want to emphasize once again that people don't own land in the way that the government thinks about property and ownership. It is the land which owns people. And if you forget this fundamental fact, then you can begin to see the land as a resource that should be exploited, and that is not how local people see it. So apart from the takeover of land, outsiders have taken over jobs. One of the government's claims for mining and industry is that it will bring in jobs. But as Manish and the Bastar Raj Morcha, which is a new organization which is struggling for the rights of Bastar as a whole, the only jobs for people is as labor. It's not as if they're becoming managers in any of these companies. What they are demanding is that people should get a share in the mining, but under the District Mineral Fund, which was expected to be something that would give people a share in the funds that came out of their areas, the DMF basically replaces the local money which the government should be investing in roads and infrastructure. And a lot of this DMF fund, if you look at the Dantewada District Mineral Fund audit, it talks about how it's invested in roads and so on. The BRM has also written to the governor pointing out that while the CRPF is conducting a special recruitment drive, and this is SPO Salvador Part 2, that there are special recruitment drives for the police and for the CRPF in Bijapur and Sukma with 100% reservation for Adivasis and not even for local SCs and OBCs, precisely because the aim is to divide villagers, to destroy the Maoist base among Adivasis. When it comes to other kinds of jobs like teachers or NMDC jobs, there is hardly any reservation for local Adivasis. So in June this year, NMDC put out L1, L2 jobs, of which only 20% in an area which is over 70% Adivasi was reserved for STs and 34% for outsiders, which means that the people of Bastar have to compete with all of these outsiders for jobs. And in the meantime, Adivasis are continuing their migration to Telangana. In June, I met, when I was in one of the villages, 4 people had died of acute silicosis and 5 people were seriously ill from working in a mass ramming factory in Telangana. And there have been several unexplained deaths in many villages in 2022, in Rekavaya, Regadgatta, 38 in one village, 40 in another village, and people attribute this to plastic rice, which is iron fortified rice. The government says it's because people are chronically malnourished, anemia, and the usual works. It's like the Israeli government saying that, Palestinians are dying not because they are being deliberately starved, but because they are undernourished. Presumably Palestinians don't have right nutrition diets. And Amit Shah has placed no deadline of March 2026 for the eradication of these deaths, for the infrastructure of schools or health services. It's only for deaths. So that brings me to my third point, which is on the intensification of violence in the last 2 years. We have seen several phases since 2005 in the last 20 years. So 2005 to 2007 was a time when villages were being burnt on a mass scale. According to government statistics, 644 villages were affected. People were just killed and their bodies were left on the side of the road. There was no accounting, even in terms of encounter deaths. From 2009 onwards, when Operation Green Hunt started, there were they were recording some of these as encounter deaths, but there were these mass incidents of killing, like there was in Tadmetla or Edesmeta or Sarkeguda. 2016 was another peak when again killings went up with some of the most horrible incidents of mass sexual violence against women in Belam, Nendra and other villages. And then there was another lull till 2024. And in the last 2 years, it's not even 2 years now, and over 550 people have been killed. And if you look at the ratio, and please, we have, as I said, we have distributed the CPJC documentation on this. If you look at the percentage of deaths compared to arrests and killings, it's very clear that there's been a huge spike in death, and the police are being told to kill rather than to arrest or to even have surrenders. In fact, surrendering is disincentivized, because if you look at the Naxalite surrender and rehabilitation policy of 2025, the government has actually incentivized killing. Section 8.1 says that if the Naxalite is captured dead or alive, the police personnel who catch them will get the reward. And if the Naxalite surrenders, then they will get the reward. So obviously, it makes a lot of sense to kill somebody and get the reward against their name, than to allow them to surrender or even to show them as arrested, because then you would have to share some of the spoils. And the reward runs into 1 crore for CC and Politburo members, 50 lakhs for military commission members. And there is no prior list of people who are wanted. So after somebody is killed, whether they're a civilian or a Naxalite, they become an 8 lakh Inami Naxali. So life is now counted in terms of the bounty that is placed on your head. People are neutralized, quote unquote, and our faithful media reproduces this dehumanized language of neutralization, as if these were not people, as if they have no families, as if they have no histories of struggle. They are simply little cockroaches who must be neutralized. We're also hearing of instances of senior Maoist leaders who have been picked up, like Renuka, who was picked up from a house and shot. But the worst is the judicial complicity in this killing. At the hearing last week of the case pertaining to the custodial torture and killing of Ramchandra Reddy, where it was pointed out by the lawyer that his wife had seen the body and there were no bullet wounds, only stab marks and torture wounds. The Chief Justice of Chhattisgarh, who a week or two earlier had gone to a crematorium and found that it smelled and said, you know, the dead deserve dignity. And the same court which has ignored the decomposing, maggot-filled bodies of people who have been captured as Naxalites in the Karegutta operation or in other operations, and by the time their families get to see them, they are so decomposed that they can't see. That same Chief Justice said that there must be dignity in death. And yet, when this Ramchandra Reddy torture case was brought before him, his response was to ask the government of Chhattisgarh, the police, to submit an affidavit saying what the Naxalite activities of Ramchandra Reddy had been. Basically, the message is that if you are a Naxalite, it doesn't matter, you can be killed or tortured, and the laws of the land no longer apply to you. So whether you're a Kashmiri, whether you're Sonam Wangchuk, habeas corpus, or you're a Naxalite, the constitution no longer exists. And as K.G. Kannabiran had said, what is on trial here is not the values of people who are taking up arms. It is the values of the government which claims to be a constitutional democracy, the values of the court which claim to be implementing the rule of the law. And if you say that it's okay to kill and torture somebody and not return their body to their families simply because they are a Naxalite or simply because they are a Kashmiri insurgent, it is you who are failing the constitution. You who are burying the constitution when you speak from the bench. Villagers are being picked up early morning, passed off as either they're kept in camps, they're picked up by the DRG. The DRG decides whether somebody will be arrested, somebody will be let off after 2-3 months. And there's a very chilling story by Malini Subramaniam on how people are being kept in preventive, well, I wouldn't even say preventive detention because they weren't doing anything. They're just being kept in detention for months under the guise that these are surrendered Naxalites who must be given skill training. So what kind of skill training they are given when they're desperate to go back to their fields, because this was peak monsoon season. This is the time of cultivation and they are being kept for skill training. The Indian government's close military weaponry association with Israel has been used in Bastar in terms of bombing, mortar shells. Villages report of, like there have been several reports of villages reporting, mortar shells being fired into their villages. And the DRG, who are really glorified SPOs, and I'll come to that later, are basically being allowed the same kind of uncontrolled access to go and pick up whoever they want. There was a chilling story that PUCL has just been doing a fact-finding on, where the DRG were drunk, they went to a village, picked up boys, debated all night whether they should kill them or leave them. And this is like, it's sort of stories that remind you of the IDF debating whether they should kill that child that they have in their sniper shots. So from the DRG and the killings in Bastar to Israel, there is a clear arc. There is also a clear arc between Amit Shah saying that all Naxalites will be wiped out by 2025, and our dear DUVC, who has announced recently that he will kuchal and dabo all urban Naxalites in his university, including women who are asking for less restrictive hostel timings, are suddenly urban Naxalites. You know, Pinjra Tod students who are saying that, you know, we should have rights, it's not we who are, you know, dangerous to men, that we should not be confined, and somehow they are dangerous anti-national people who must be eradicated. Now, what is all of this premised on? This connection is also the mining. There is the Kottagudem Kirandul railway line that has just been announced, which will go through some part of it, 12 kilometers, I think, through Telangana, a lot more through Chhattisgarh. And it's not as if people are using these railways or using the 6-lane highways that are coming up from the mining sites to the villages. The interior roads are as they are. Ambulances find it hard to get anywhere during the monsoons. But these 6-lane highways, on which there is a huge amount of corruption, as we know also from the death of Mukesh Chandrakar, are now the pride of Bastar's development. The Bodhghat hydroelectric line, the Bodhghat hydroelectric project, which, as Manish has pointed out, will be impossible to implement because of the rocky terrain. So there are hills, you cannot possibly have, you know, irrigation or electricity going to some of these far-flung villages because of the mountains in between, unless you destroy the mountains. You have the Raughat mines, which are coming up through what the government environmental impact assessment report described as some of the most biodiverse forests in the country, which have innumerable endangered species. You have a new defense base in Abujmad, which is being planned. And above all, you have mining. You have mining everywhere. 175 mining leases were granted by Chhattisgarh in 2022. Of these, 51 are in Bastar alone, most of them in the private sector. Mineral revenue accounted for 18.45% of state receipts. All of this is there in this report, which HRF has also produced. Actually, this report HRF has produced, and other organizations were also members of this fact-finding. And nearly half of this mineral revenue comes from Bastar. So, in short, Bastar is being treated as an internal colony of this country, and it's no surprise that going back to the making of the constitution, when Jaipal Singh, the Adivasi leader, asked that in each of the 5th schedule areas of the country there should be a separate budget which showed both the internal receipts and the external outflows. That proposal was shot down because it would have shown very clearly the kind of internal colonialism that we have in this country. When I was doing fieldwork for my PhD in 1992, the government had proposed 2 steel plants in Mauli Bhata. As usual, they had not told the villagers that they were planning to build steel plants, and the villagers only got to know when the foundation stone of these plants was being built. B.D. Sharma, who had earlier been collector in Bastar, then organized people to demand shares in the plants and the right to be consulted. And in return, BJP activists, who were mostly outsiders and traders, stripped and paraded him around Jagdalpur with a garland of shoes. Today, when every single urban community is turning into a gated colony, when you are asked to give your name, phone number, Aadhaar, your mother's, father's, everything's details every time you go into a colony, people in Jharkhand are being arrested for saying under Pathalgadi that you should ask our permission when you come into our village. When the Moolvasi Bachao Manch, which is a platform of youth in Bastar, started organizing against camps, saying that the government should follow the land, the law of the land, the 5th schedule, PESA, by consulting villagers whenever they set up a security camp on their land. They were banned. They were banned last year, and the original order banning them simply does not even accuse them of being a Maoist front. It simply says that they were opposing government policy. So if you are an Adivasi, if you ask that anyone who comes into your village, tries to take over your land, should consult you, if you oppose this external siting of camps or industries on your land, you become an anti-national, because Adivasis have no property. It's all government property, it's all for the benefit of the nation, and Adivasis are not part of this nation. 70 years of independence and nothing has changed in the way that Adivasis and their property and their land is being treated. Across Bastar, you see that it's like an amoeba which spreads out. These security camps come at night, they cut down the trees, and there is no compensation under Campa. We don't know what's happening to the trees. These are valuable teak trees, all kinds of valuable timber trees. Who knows who is profiting from this, because nobody is asking, nobody is telling. We tried to actually interview the IG on this, but he was, oh, maybe the forest department, they come and mark trees beforehand. So if they come and mark trees beforehand, then why do you need to come like a thief in the middle of the night and set up your security camp? Between 2019 and 2025, according to Ministry of Home Affairs figures, the government has established over 320 new camps, alongside 68 to 80 night landing helipads, and the number of fortified police stations has increased from 66 in 2014 to 555. Along with all these security camps, which the government is never going to give back to villagers, because the IG said that they will be used for skill training, the skill training in which people are being kept in detention. People know that these camps have not come for the Maoists. The Maoists may or may not be finished by 2025, but they feel, and everywhere I spoke to, even in areas that are not involved in the Maoist movement, people feel that the camps have come up because if they protest against mining in the future, the camps will be used to suppress them. And that is also why the government is refusing to even consider peace talks, because if you have peace talks, you have a conclusive resolution of a situation. But as long as you have a few Maoist remnants which can be kept and shown as, these are still, to be mopped up, then you have a justification for the camps and you have a justification for continued colonization of the land. And it's quite telling that the camps which came up, the BSF camps which came up, the 22 camps which came up around Raoghat, came up even when there was no Maoist activity in that area. My fifth point is institutional failure, and the failure of the Godi media is so well known that there is little point talking about it, except to note that now they are not the only actors, and thanks to a whole chain of YouTube channels and other forms of news coming out, we have a little more information that local people are producing than was available earlier. But what is shocking is the judicial failure. And as I mentioned, in the case where the judiciary is refusing to recognize dignity in death, refusing to recognize that torture is not acceptable, even when it came to our case, which has been going on since 2007, and it was a case that was filed not just by E.S. Sarma, Ramchandra Guha and me, but by Manish Kunjam, Kartam Joga, Dudhi Joga, people who were personally affected. Dudhi Joga's house in Arlampalli was burnt down, and all he got by way of compensation on paper was rupees 10,000, and even that he didn't get. What the government has repeatedly said is that their compensation policy is only for Naxal Pidit. So if you are affected, all we have been saying is if you are compensating people who have been killed by Naxalites, compensate people who have been killed by security forces. But for 20 years, they have been resisting this simple equality. And Justice Sudarshan Reddy, who is one of the rare judges who had a sense of both compassion and justice, Because compassion is something that is often missing even when judges have a sense of the law, has been turned into an urban Naxal by Amit Shah. Shah just claimed that Justice Reddy used the Supreme Court, and we wonder how many RSS judges are sitting there who think in terms of using the Supreme Court, because presumably the justices that have been appointed should not think of their office in such instrumental terms. And he's claiming that that the 2011 judgment banning Salva-Judum helped Naxalism. In fact, it only helped the SPOs, because the major beneficiaries were the SPOs who were then absorbed into the regular constabulary and given more money and better guns. And what Shah ignored, and the press, the compliant press also ignored, is that the same judge also gave the black money judgment, which the BJP milked in 2014 to promise every Indian 15 lakhs in their bank account and achhe din. We're still waiting for the black money, the people who have escaped the country with that black money, we're still waiting for the achhe din. But the judge who gave this judgment is now an urban Naxal. In any case, Justice Reddy and Nijjar were not alone in their condemnation of Salva-Judum and the human rights violations that it had caused. Between 2007 and 2025, the matter came before 24 different judges of the Supreme Court, and all of them recognized that there was grave injustice being done. Even Justice Nagaratna and Justice Satish Sharma, who disposed of the case in May this year, reiterated the 2011 order and directed, and I quote, "We find that having regard to the situation that has emerged over the decades in the state of Chhattisgarh, it is necessary that specific steps are taken so as to bring about peace and rehabilitation of the areas requiring the attention of the state, as well as the central government, who would have to act in a coordinated manner. We note that it is the duty of the state of Chhattisgarh as well as the Union of India to take adequate steps to bring about peace and rehabilitation to the residents of the state of Chhattisgarh who have been affected by the violence from whatever quarter it may have arisen." Again, the client media, which is a mouthpiece of the government, did not report on this aspect of the judgment. They only noted that the contempt petition had been dismissed. And as for the contempt petition, I think what the court has committed is a contempt of itself, because if you look at what the government of Chhattisgarh did, as soon as the 2011 judgment was issued, ordering the disbanding of SPOs, saying that they should no longer be armed, should be given dignified employment in other fields, they came out with the Chhattisgarh Armed Auxiliary Act. And they submit in court that they had disarmed SPOs and are not using them in counterinsurgency purposes. The very first paragraph of that Armed Auxiliary Act says that these armed auxiliaries will be used in combat operations against the Maoists. They are called armed auxiliaries. And so they give these affidavits saying, we have disarmed them, and the court says they were directed to give an affidavit and they have given the affidavit. I mean, I have never seen anything that is so blatantly a contempt of the court, and yet it is not treated as such. So, the DRG continue. People who had surrendered barely 3 weeks ago are now given arms, and the government claims that they're given long-term training, they have been given training in human rights, forensics, etc., etc. But 3 weeks later, they are given with a different kind of gun and sent off to the forest. And how do these people who have cases against them, who are at one point Inami Naxali with 8 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 40 lakhs against them, suddenly now, because they have become DRG, allowed to go out and kill again? So basically what the police is saying is that it's okay if we have murderers in our ranks, so long as they are in our ranks and not in the ranks of the opposite party. So in terms of a legal argument, what sort of an argument is this about the rule of law? So what is the solution? I think there are many people here who are far more aware of the solution than I am. People who have been observing the situation in Chhattisgarh very closely, who have been observing the situation all over. But what I would like people to think about is what an Adivasi-led peace process would look like. The local Sarva Samaj has been strangely silent. Despite all the local Samajas saying they want peace talks, the president of the Sarva Samaj has refused to issue any statement. It's deeply frustrating, but whatever it is that will come, it cannot come on the back of mining, on the back of outsiders deciding what is going to happen to Bastar. It cannot come without justice, and I mean, whatever shape peace comes, it cannot come without justice. And not just at the level of peace talks, but there has to be a wider rethinking of the whole structure of Adivasi rights. So when Jaipal Singh was talking during the making of the Constitutional Assembly, he was talking of rights as peoples. The demand for Jharkhand as a separate state was not just for a state, was for the recognition that Adivasis, despite their differing languages, which was the reason for government not recognizing them as a linguistic state, excuse for government, should be recognized as a people. And instead, the whole discussion for the last 50 years in academic discourse and even more widely has been hijacked by something called the Ghurye-Elwin debate on integration versus assimilation versus whatever. Whereas that was never the debate. It was a debate should have followed, just like Ambedkar was never studied in sociology till recently when, annihilation of caste has become a textbook. Jaipal Singh and what he stood for and what all the other people fighting in Tebhaga, Telangana, all the other movements have not entered our conception that people need rights as peoples, they need statehood, they need political power, they need economic power, not just some laboring jobs, but as actual owners of their own resources. And I want to end with a passage from William Morris. When I think of all the lives that have been lost, that have been sacrificed, struggling for justice, I pondered all these, so I'm quoting, I pondered all these things and how men fought and lost the battle, and other men have to fight for what they lived for, but under another name. Thank you.
Madam, myself, Dr. Abbas, I have done little research on Koya community in Khammam, Jagdalpur community there, madam. My simple submission rather than question is that how the representative politics has failed to secure the rights of the tribals, because representative politics, what is happening is now tribals itself is on the other side, on the power side. Let us say that now the President of India is a tribal community and she never spoke a single word on these tribals. And do you think that the representative politics has failed, madam? I am from Hyderabad Central University, madam. I have done little research. My MPhil is on Koya community, madam. And I feel that how to understand this? You have their own community and killing their own community. Does representative politics fail, madam?
So where has representative politics all over the country has failed the people of this country. So where is it addressing the demands that people have, and yet the struggle has to be to make these representative politics more less bound by money, by corruption, and all the things that organizations like ADR have been fighting for. Because I do think that representation matters, otherwise we might as well have had colonialism, because representation didn't matter, democracy doesn't matter. So there can be different forms of representative politics, there can be mechanisms to improve, and I think that is as important a struggle as other forms of struggle.
there are no questions, we'll go ahead with the next speech.
Hello, good morning to everyone. Dear Seva here, concerned citizen. I just want to ask that as we are witnessing so many plots and regarding these minorities, SCs, so how to convince the upper caste people, how to know what are the steps we guys are taking to know them in how troubled we are, and future also our lands and how the rural and urban communities have been developing, and we are just marginalizing and weakening. So how the weaker and marginalized sections are going to suffer. So how to convince the upper caste people, to ask what are the steps to be taken to know our sufferings, madam.
ఇంకా ఎవరైనా ఒక 2-3 క్వశ్చన్స్ తర్వాత మేడం సమాధానం చెప్తా అంటున్నారు.
Thank you, Nandini. Fantastic session. The thing is that the core problem that I see is governance and the failure of judiciary. How do we address, unless and until the core cause of the problem, that is a Zionist mindset which has been injected into this entire process of governance through the current Hindutva-led BJP is actually neutralized and corrected. There is no way any Indian can expect justice in the system. The tribals happen to be, as well as the Adivasi, are just one part of the larger society which is under duress at the moment. The educated class is dismissed as urban nurses, and these people just don't have a voice because they're not able to get across their entire idea. Now, what sort of revolution is expected to actually change this entire mindset? Because the existing system and the judicial system, which ought to have been independent, is no longer independent. The fact that the basic rights that have been assigned to each and every individual through the Constitution are not even understood by the judicial system. That essentially means it brings me to the question of the competence and the quality of the judges that we actually have in the benches. How do we address multiple issues, including a government as well as the Home Minister, which is rogue? That is what the issue that I think this forum has to address. Rest of the thing is just idle intellectual talk, which will lead us nowhere.
Then how we can address the judicial deficiencies? What's the mechanism for the democracy? We are not able to understand what's the mechanism for the judicial failures.
Madam, how do you think state impunity can be challenged, especially when there is judicial complicity with the state, be it in Operation Kagar or be it in Operation Clean Hand?
Hello, Professor Sundar. A lot of questions on the judiciary, but there is one aspect of the judiciary I thought you could throw light on is when you approach the Supreme Court in your experience, and then when you talk about how the Chhattisgarh High Court functions, what is the sociology of each of these courts? What background do the judges come from? And most importantly, when there is interaction between the state and, of course, over the table and the other way around as well.
Actually, I don't have the answer to any of these questions because, how to convince upper caste, how to transform the judiciary, how to do this, that and the other, I don't know. You know as well as I do how to go about doing these things, and there are people much better qualified in each of these fields. As for how to convince upper caste, let me just suggest that you read this wonderful article by D.R. Nagaraj in his book The Flaming Feet, where he talks of the differences in the approach between Gandhi and Ambedkar. And Ambedkar thought that power could be won against the upper caste, which is important. Gandhi thought that upper caste needed to be reformed, which is also important. And Nagaraj looks at them both. So I don't know. That's one answer. The second is how to change the judicial system. There are a lot of people who have been talking about that. Whether you have a judicial accountability, like you have a commission to appoint the judiciary, reservations in the judiciary, social background needs to be changed, all of that. There hardly even women judges, there are no women judges. So again, there is a lot of literature on this which practicing lawyers and others who study the law can answer better. How tribals can be, Adivasis can be integrated into the mainstream, or how, I think they are part of the mainstream. The Indian mainstream is a mainstream which has many different types of cultures, many different parts, and I don't see why we should allow somebody to claim that they are the mainstream and everybody else is not part of that mainstream and needs to be uplifted. So the upper caste need to be told how regressive their mentality is, how they need to be uplifted, how they need to stop thinking that Karwa Chauth is the biggest festival on earth, and how that controlling women, Pinjra Tod women, etc., that is a regressive idea. So really the uplift has to be the other way around, if anyone has to be uplifted at all. On the relief camps, so-called relief camps, the Salvajadum camps, many of them by now are really camps which house the SPOs who don't want to go back home, and they find it easier to be next to urban centers, sort of small semi-urban centers, and they continue to retain land in the villages as well. So that is, I don't think that is an issue so much. What is an issue is this slightly dangerous, quite dangerous proposal that Gutti Koyas from Telangana and Andhra should be sent back to live in camps in Chhattisgarh. Many of them don't want to go back. They should have a right as Adivasis to the forest land where they are as IDPs, rather than being sent back into camps which will take away the land of other villages. Many of those who wanted to go back have gone back. So I think this whole process which is now playing out with the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, the ministry, needs greater attention from Telangana groups and people here who have been observing these issues. Thank you.